Hello, everybody. I'd love to welcome Ray Cox here from MediFinance today. And Ray is going to be discussing in a lot more detail different aspects of finance and how to obtain finance and what's involved when you're setting up a brand new practice. So I'll pass over to you, Ray, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, good morning, and thank you, Bobby. Good morning, everyone. I've been involved in financing for dentists and indeed other health professionals, doctors and veterinary surgeons now for, unfortunately, around about 40 years. I got into this and right from the word go realised that this was an amazing area of finance that required more than many businesses do. The very nature of what dentists have to use in their practices to deliver the treatments that they want to practices has got more expensive and indeed more sophisticated over the years. When I first started, a basic dental chair and even high-speed drills were only just coming into the market. But now we have very sophisticated imaging, CBCT, 3D imaging, allowing dentists to make more and better judgments on the treatments that they can deliver and how to deliver those treatments. The problem with that is that it comes at a price, and like anything that's technically based, the price just goes up and up and up. After a period of time, it can come down. I mean, we see now the standard panoramic X-ray, which was cutting edge and state of the art back in the late 70s, cost about the same as a 3D CBT scanner does now. But now you can get an ordinary basic panoramic for 10, 12, 15,000. But 10, 15,000 pounds back in 1978 was about as much as 60 to 80,000 pounds now. So, and when you're developing a practice, and particularly a new practice, it's quite natural that younger dentists, having made the big decision to start a practice, are going to want the very best. They've worked probably on sophisticated equipment in wherever they've been working as an associate or an assistant, and naturally they want to have exactly the same thing. And by and large, that has to be made possible because you don't want to start a brand new practice and be using inferior equipment that doesn't allow you to do the job that you've been trained to do. So it's a little bit of a chicken and egg situation, really. You're at the point where you're least able to afford the very best, but you can't afford not to be without it. And so I suppose my job is very much to link that aspiration with reality and see how far we can get you down the line to acquiring that equipment, acquiring those practice premises in order to make you set up. A development that's just recently started in the last few years, that's been missing in dentistry for quite a long while, has been the desire of young dentists to set up their own squat practices. We used to see this, it was a matter of routine back in the 70s and the 80s and the early part of the 90s. And then, for a variety of reasons, economic one, but also because of the birth of, the growth of corporates offered a very easy career path to young dentists coming out of dental school. The incidence of young dentists starting their own practice started to slow down quite considerably. I'm glad to say that we see here in MediFinance and in the finance world in general, that changing round quite dramatically in the last 3 to 4 years. And evidenced by Bobby Vandal himself, who has actually embarked on this journey. He took the decision to set up his own practice, did it pretty well all on his own, with a little help from us, but mainly on his own. But one of the realizations that he came to in going through the journey was that it can be exceedingly difficult, and his journey and the story of his journey and his experiences were worth putting in front of other young dentists. And that's what we're trying to do with these broadcasts and with a lot of other marketing that we're doing, to try and bring the message that setting up a new practice, yes, it's a big step, biggest step you'll probably ever make since you decided to become a dentist and go to dental school in the first place. But it's incredibly rewarding. What we're finding now is that dentists have rediscovered that aspiration. Apart from working as an associate for a corporate or a private dentist, to get your skills honed, having come out of dental school, you've got all the knowledge in your head, you have to translate that into your hands to actually do the job. But once that period is over, we're finding that young dentists now want to go back to where maybe their parents were if they were dentists, and set up their own business, start their own practice, and get the much greater potential rewards that come from that in the years ahead. But
just on that point, Ray, what do you think is driving that cycle?
What do I think?
What do you think? Yeah, what do you think is driving that cycle for? You said there was a dip off. Dentists weren't setting up their own practices, corporates were emerging. Why do you think at this point in time in particular, there's been a big resurgence of, dentists wanting to open their own practices?
I think back when it started to tail off, there was even greater uncertainty about the health service than there is today, and that was evidenced by, a considerable outflow from the dentistry of NHS provision. Older dentists just didn't want to get involved in the changes in contract that were going on at that time. They took the step to go out privately. But for young dentists coming out, it was a big step. The underpinning of the NHS that was there for their parents and their grandparents when they became dentists wasn't there anymore. The corporates offered a very good career path, a salary, a job, guaranteed conditions, and that seemed very attractive to many dentists at the time. I think as time has gone on, the corporates themselves have gone through and are going through a tremendous change. And I think more and more dentists started to think, is this what I want to do for the next 30 to 40 years? Simply work for somebody else? Or do I want to try and start on my own? And I think that's what's driving it now is aspiration, desire, those sort of things, Bobby.
Yeah, no, 100%. From my personal experience, it was all those reasons. Aspiration, desire, boredom, doing the same thing over and over again, and desire for a new challenge, and the satisfaction, that comes along with it.
Yeah, well, I think that's, and I absolutely agree with you, and you've done it, so, you're talking from personal experience. I think the big challenge, of course, comes that once you've got all those, the desire, the aspiration, the drive, the subject of money looms large and cannot be avoided. And it looms large in a number of different areas. First of all, you've got to find somewhere to practice. You've got to equip it, and then you've got to run it. And all of those three elements are not mutually exclusive. They form together to either make or break that aspiration. Practice premises, no longer do dentists want to practice where they live. That's long since gone. When I came into the business, probably 7 out of every 10 dentists I visited in the ground floor of their house or in an annex built at the back. That's long gone. So we've now got, when a young dentist, as you did, starts out on this career path, you're looking probably at converted shop premises, in some cases a floor of an office building or something like that, but something that generally speaking is not a dental practice already and has got to be converted. And that's probably the largest slice of funding that we are called upon to provide. Contrary to popular opinion, the banks are not as averse to new startups as they were probably as little as 5 years ago. They've seen new practices working. They've seen how these can make money for dentists and indeed themselves. Banks love to make money for themselves. We all know that. In fact, they like to make more money than you do. But we find that providing the plans put together properly Bobby, and we'll come on to that in a second, providing you present the banks with a solid, costed, well thought out plan of what you're going to do with this building of one sort or another to turn it into a dental practice. We find that they are more and more amenable to coming up with what you want, or at least in large part. But that planning process, and again I refer back to you because you had to go through it, that planning process of deciding where, what, how, when, and most important, why. The thing one has to get over to bankers is, why are you doing this? Have you got a solid idea in your head of why you want to do it and what's going to drive you forward to make it successful? So, and that is as important in itself as all the cash flows and the business plans that are required. And we have to help lots of young dentists in putting those together, because you come out of dental school, nobody told you how to do a cash flow forecast, nobody told you how to write a business plan. So unless you're very, very lucky or have got other colleagues or acquaintances to help you, that's one of the big jobs that we have to do right from the word go. Interpret onto paper the young dentist's desire about what he wants to do and why he wants to do it. But putting those things in place is absolutely essential. Turn up to a bank without a solid, well thought through business plan and all the components that form a business plan is a waste of everybody's time, not least yours.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And it's one of those things. Dentists always ask. I find a lot of dentists ask too late. So what I typically see is dentists have found a building and they've put an offer in, and then the banks are asking to see a business plan, and then it's a quick rush. Then what do I need to do now? And how do I go about this? And how do I build a business plan? Where really the business planning stage should be step one in the whole process.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can put down the elements of the business plan without an actual address to put in to put alongside it. So get the business plan written first, the what, why, when, and how, and then once you've got that, and you've got something to put in front of the bank manager with our help, then go and look for the building that most fits what the sort of practice that you want to form. And also, one needs to sort of think forward. You've got to look at the building from what it provides now and what it needs to provide 3, 4, 5 years down the line, when hopefully the business has been successful and one surgery is not sufficient, 2 surgeries is not sufficient. You don't want to have a building that only will give you 2 surgeries and a decontamination room. And if you want to expand into more surgeries and an imaging suite, etc., you're faced 3 or 4 years down the line with having to up sticks and move to a new building. Really bad planning. So almost over compensate to start with. Look for somewhere that, no, you can't use all of it at the immediate time. Close part of it off maybe, but you've got the expansion room when that expansion comes from all the work you've been doing in the first place. Equally, don't go and overspend on technical equipment. Yes, of course, you want the best that you can afford in this first stage, but don't go equipping yourself with all the wonderful gizmos that an endodontic specialist or an implant specialist might be using if you're not going to be able to use them from day one. They just become expensive toys with a debt hanging around them that has to be serviced. So yeah, quality equipment, absolutely, but only what you really need to start off with, but make sure you've got the structure to put in all that extra sophisticated equipment once it's required.
Yeah, we had a great conversation about this within our own group, all the dentists who were starting up last week actually, about equipment. And there was a particular couple, therapist, dentist partners, who are setting up a practice at the moment, and they the therapist is very keen to have a piece of equipment which is worth about 15, 20 grand. And the way I put it to them was, it's quite simple. When you're looking at buying equipment, what is the business case for that piece of equipment? And what will your return on investment be? So if you're going to look at putting in, for example, in our practice, we have a CT scanner. Okay, yes, it was an upfront cost, but implants is a big part of our practice from day one. So that machine pays for itself from day one. We know how much it costs us on finance. We know how how many CT scans we need to take, and how many implants we need to do to enable us to justify that. And that creates the business case for it. So, I'd say that for any dentist when they're looking at buying equipment, definitely you don't overspend at the start. You start with what's essential. But if you are going to introduce things, what is the business case for it? You don't just buy it for the sake of buying it because you like it or something that you like using. What's the numbers behind it, and what return will you get off the back of it?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I was in a practice recently where they'd bought 3 years ago a really sophisticated microscope. And in talking to the dentist, because it was sitting in the corner with a cover over it, and I said, well, he said, well, we had hoped to get an endodontic specialist in, but that didn't work. And we've just left it there ever since. And I said, well, how many times have you used it? He said, we've never used it.
Wow.
And that's, I mean, I didn't at the time go into, well, why didn't you try and find another endodontist? But that's the sort of thing that unplanned, ill thought through investment can provide. The other thing, I think you're absolutely right, though. Where there are pieces of equipment that generally can show a return on investment in their own right, and imaging, I suppose, is probably the greatest area of that, because it highlights so many things that you don't know what's going on and can't treat unless you can see them. So I think imaging, the best imaging you can have, is probably extremely cost effective. But I often say to people that sometimes are afraid of financing too much, or afraid of buying too much. One of the things to consider is that if you've got £20,000 capital, £20,000 capital will buy you £20,000 worth of equipment, or indeed any other asset. But £20,000 in finance payments can probably get you £100,000 of capital equipment on the day. And that's one of the things, this is not encouraging practices to borrow, but it's encouraging you to look at what your cash flow, and that will have been worked out on your cash flow forecast, what your cash flow will buy you in terms of, capital buying power, which is more than if you're sitting with an amount of money in the bank that either you've saved or somebody's kind relative has given you. In my experience, there aren't too many kind relatives around when it comes to forming a dental practice. But that's one of my mantras in life. And also, and you've heard me say this before, look at your investment in terms of what it does for you, not what it actually represents in itself, but what it enables you to do.
Yeah, no, brilliant. I agree with that. I mean, a prime example is intraoral scanner. For us, it was a given. You have to have that on day one, and it is a big cost up front, but that gives us multiple things. It gives us a patient experience that patients don't get in other practices. So you get a wow factor, it builds goodwill with your patients, and off the back of having that piece of equipment, it allows you to communicate better with your patients in order to generate more work and higher value work because of what you can show them, what you couldn't show them without having that.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the other things I tend to concentrate on a lot when I'm talking to young dentists starting for the first time is how you look at capital, and I will say that making the most use of capital that you've got, because everybody goes into a project with some, well, one hopes. I have seen a lot that have no capital behind them whatsoever. They're expecting to borrow everything, which is a rather naive policy to think of. The banks will lend you money, but they also want to see that you're putting in something as well. So let's assume that you have got a block of money that's come from a generous relative, or just that you've accumulated yourself. How best to use that capital? I always say that put your capital that you saved into things that are going to appreciate, and that has got to be the building that you're going to practice in. If you've been lucky enough to be going for a freehold premises, then putting your capital into that is absolutely essential. And to some extent, the bank will demand it. Even if it's a leasehold premises, improvements you make to that building that you're going to be there for 15 odd years are still worth putting your capital in. For your equipment and things that are going to be used up relatively quickly, then those are the things to finance. You know, no point in putting your capital into dental equipment, even sophisticated dental equipment, that's actually going to lose 50% of its value almost the first week that you start using it. Equipment depreciates, property appreciates, and that is what I call making best use of your capital. And the other thing, that the third element of finance, so we've talked about, you know, getting the building and affording that, buying the equipment. The big area that lots of dentists forget is that having got all that, and you open on day 1, and on day 30, you've got your first bills for all your sundries to pay for, you've got your staff to pay for, you've got a plethora of other costs, you've got yourself to pay. Where's the money coming from that? What provision has there been made for working capital? And I rather bang on about that when I'm talking to young dentists as part of the plan, because you need to set that up as well. You need to make sure how quickly is the cash flow that you've predicted actually going to come through. Most cash flow forecasts are out by at least 3 months, if not more, in actually what they say they're going to do as to what they do. So making sure that you've got, I mean, a very standard thing really, making sure that you're taught with the bank, that you've managed, that you've also covered provision of an overdraft of some sort, because overdraft finance in most businesses, be they large or small, is absolutely critical. I've rarely known a business able to succeed without some form of overdraft in place, at least for the first 6 months. Equally, overdraft finance is very dangerous because there is no formal contract. I mean, you sign an overdraft agreement, but it effectively allows the bank to withdraw that 24 hours notice. It's not like a term loan over 5 years, where as long as you make the repayments, the bank's going to leave you alone. You start messing about too much with the overdraft, massively going overdrawn on the agreed overdraft amount, and the banks can turn very nasty indeed. So, absolutely critical you have one, but important that you use it wisely and you don't abuse it, because if you abuse the overdraft, the banks will abuse you.
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. And then one of the things that we get asked quite a lot, Ray, so for a dentist who's, you know, right at the beginning of the journey and they're just starting out and they don't know where to start when it comes to finance, you know, what is the first step? You know, what should they be doing in terms of assessing their own personal finances before they start, in terms of, you know, starting to thinking about a business plan, you know, what are the kind of key elements, components they should be thinking about?
Well, I mean, I could be trite and say, come and talk to us. But one of the things that we do, in the old days, one could go along any high street, wherever you decided to practice, and walk into a bank and see a bank manager and sit down with him, talk to him about your plans. In many cases, with professional people, they would be taken to the bank by their father or their relative who was involved in business, and the thing would be set up for them. Sadly, we all know that isn't possible these days. There aren't the banks most of the banks are closed, and even in those bigger branches, there aren't necessarily specific managers that a dentist could talk to about the project. We've got on our team a number of ex-bank managers, and what we do is we do, for the young dentists, we do that talk. We do the talk that they used to have with the bank manager before they've even put pen to paper, just to see what they want to do, and then tell them what pen to paper they need to do. So professional advisors of any sort, accountants, you know, that know something about dentistry, those are the people to talk to before you even start writing that business plan. Because until you know what to put down in that business plan, you know, you're batting in the dark. So you need somebody to tell you what to put down and what not to put down. I've seen business plans that are literally 2 full sketch sheets of lined paper at one end of the scale, and at the other end of the scale, a tome, something as thick as Encyclopedia Britannica. Somewhere in the middle is the Holy Grail, and it's not either of those 2 extremes.
So brilliant. Yeah, I guess the key thing I take from that is that you need to take professional advice. That is the most important thing, and it's one of the things that gets overlooked. I think what I've seen is one of the biggest things with dentists is that the cost of setting up a practice is so much that they think that we can save money by skipping paying professionals for advice and help, when ultimately it's actually the opposite. Paying for that professional advice beforehand will actually save you money in the long run and a lot of stress.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, couldn't agree with you more. I mean, if I want an advanced piece of, you know, dentistry done, or I just want any dentistry done, I go and see a dentist. When a dentist wants, you know, to borrow money to start off a practice, he should go and see professionals. That's day-to-day job is in doing that. And if you get that right from the word go, it's like getting the right dental treatment. If you get it right from the word go, then it'll be a very pleasurable experience, and you'll end up with feeling a lot better. Yeah. Whether that's from, you know, a good set of dental treatment, or the ultimate outcome in getting your dental practice off the ground. And there's no shortcut to that. That's absolutely, you know, always right down the line, professional advice to start with, and at every stage of your career, because even you know, you start maybe thinking about the second or the third practice. That's not necessarily a simple rerun of what you did the first time. So it's every project needs that professional advice all over again.
Yeah, no, definitely. And also, Ray, one of the other questions I get asked a lot is, you know, what are the different types of finance that are actually available for dentists who are setting up practice? It doesn't obviously all come in one form. So you're okay just to share about, you know, what the different options are?
Yeah. Well, in that first element, getting the practice, the buildings, the premises started in the first place, that's always, well, either by structured term loan for the freehold, or even a structured term loan for the length of lease. If it's a leasehold premises, the bank will only lend for the period that you've arranged the lease for. So if you're wanting a 20-year loan because of cost, but the building you've selected, the landlord will only give you a 5-year lease, that's not going to work. The bank will not lend beyond the term of the lease. Freehold premises, I always recommend where they are possible, even though it probably involves more costs initially. But strange enough, most financial institutions would rather lend more for a freehold building because it gives them added security than that same amount of money for a leasehold building. So in many ways, although the sums might be more, considerably more, sometimes getting funding for a freehold premises actually works out to be easier. Most of the banks that specialise in dentistry certainly will go up to a 25-year term for loans. If you think suddenly, well, that seems a long way ahead on it, you could always repay it early. If the business does really well and you're in a position to repay that loan early, that's absolutely fine. the chances are that won't happen, and you'll probably, by the time that you're thinking about, I might be in a position to repay that loan, you're thinking about a new venture that's going to take up even more money. So that's usually what happens there. So structured finance, anything from 10 to 25 years for the building or the long-term lease. Equipping it can come in the form of either hire purchase or leasing. 20 years ago, virtually everything we did for equipment was on leasing, and simply because the tax system at that time, the tax relief system, mitigated in favour of that form of finance. For the last 10, 12 years, the tax system has mitigated in favour of hire purchase, where you end up owning the equipment outright. And that really is, it moves between the two. If the tax system was to change and leasing was to become the better option, that's the one we would use for that. But at the moment, financing equipment is hire purchase. We've already spoken about the business of loans for working capital, mainly overdraft. In many cases, a top-up loan is required for the fitting out of the building. So the bank may well lend for the acquisition. They may lend for some of the fitting out, but very often there's a shortfall. And we accommodate that with the use of unsecured business loans, which we can arrange anything up to 5 years unsecured, and that's where we fill that other gap that might fall between what the bank provides for the building and the equipment side as well. So there's four basically different sorts of funding: structured loan, unsecured business loan, HP or leasing, and overdraft.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, that's a really clear explanation of exactly what's available. And then I guess one of the other questions I get asked quite frequently is, how long does that process take to obtain finance? I know obviously that varies, massively whether you're buying a freehold or a leasehold, but it's something that comes up quite commonly.
I'll phrase that in the correct way, and all the elements have been put together. From the time that the dentist approaches a finance company and the bank himself, or via ourselves, somebody like ourselves, you can usually get a response, an agreement in principle within about 2 weeks, whether they're going to do it or not. In terms of equipment finance on its own, that can be a lot quicker. We can often get equipment finance in 24 to 36 hours. But the big project is going to take probably 2 to 3 weeks. Now, the bank, having said yes in principle and even issued a facility letter, the actual process then can take, I've known it as quick as 6 weeks. I've known it as long as 15 months. And I'll tell you, you can guess which project was the best thought out and the best prepared. But even with the best will in the world, with everybody doing what they said, I will say to people, allow 6 months from start to finish. That's my experience of how long it can take. If you allow 6 months, then if you get it done quicker, that's a bonus. You won't be then disappointed if it does take that long.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. It's a good ballpark figure, to work with in your head. No, that's fine. That makes sense. And then the other thing I was going to ask you about is interest rates. How does this affect dentists when it comes to finance? And any thoughts on what's going to happen?
Well, if I was a real guru on interest rates, I probably wouldn't be sitting here now. Well, I probably wouldn't be talking to you from my villa in Greece, Bobby. But no, I mean, we've gone through a roller coaster of. I was talking to a dentist the other day who was reflecting on the fact that he had just looked at his RBS loan that he got back in the sort of 2015-16 at sort of 1% over base, and what likelihood I thought there would be if those days came back. And I said, no likelihood at all, in my opinion. We learned the mistakes of extremely low interest rates, as we indeed in the 70s and the 80s learned the tragic lesson, very high interest rates. Banks were lending to dentists back in the 70s at anything from 15 to 23%. Seems mind-blowing now, but that's what happened. I think where we are now is much more realistic. Will they come down? Yes, I think they will. I think that gradual drift is going to continue. I would have been more certain than this had we not been told that we're in a terrible economic situation that nobody thought we were in, which I think is a bit of overplay. But I think, generally speaking, and the words coming out of America at the moment are the same, that interest rates can fall a bit further yet. Do I see them massively falling? Do I see us getting down to the 2.5% again? No, not in any foreseeable future. But I think that they will drift down a little bit from where they are now.
Yeah, I guess the reason why I asked that is because a lot of dentists end up with the question of, when they've obtained their finance, do they fix their rates or do they keep them variable? And unfortunately, nobody has a crystal ball, and you have to work out the maths and see what you're comfortable with and what you can tolerate.
Well, fixed rates in the 1980s, 80%, were obviously not a very good thing. But fixed rates in the last few years, inflation's going up, and then they have been very good. But no, you can never hope to get it right all the time. It's an inexact science. I do, but particularly for things like equipment, where you can fix all HP and leasing agreements are all costing you £300 a month. He's going to be costing you £300 a month in 4 years' time. That actually does. And depreciating as well, fixed rate against depreciating costs, then that's quite.
Okay, right. So one of the questions I had was about interest rates and about what you think may happen, in the future, whether things may go up or down. And the reason why I ask is because a lot of dentists are posed with the question whether to fix their rates or stay on variable rates. And is there any thoughts and considerations, around making that decision?
Well, I think the dilemma on interest rates and whether the fix or go variable is usually in relation to the long-term loan to actually acquire the practice. It tends not to be such an issue in terms of when it comes to equipment finance. Equipment finance has always been fixed rate. And from a cash flow point of view, it's quite nice to know that the scanner that you start off costing you £300 is still going to be costing you £300 in 5 years' time, but will have been affected by the effects of inflation. So you're almost paying for today's equipment with tomorrow's devalued money with fixed rates on equipment. But obviously, when it comes to the larger structured loan on the building, it is a dilemma, and usually I think many of the banks offer a short period of fixed rate finance with a lot of loans these days. And if you can get that when interest rates are low, it's possibly worth having. Longer term, one just doesn't know. You might be lucky and get a lot of benefit out of a variable rate until they start to go up. Equally, it may go the other way, and that's the big conundrum. There is no golden answer. And if I knew that, I'd be sitting in a villa in Greece talking to you, not in my sitting room as I am now.
Yeah, well, I felt the full effects of this because I didn't fix my business loan, and I went on a variable rate right before the Ukraine war started, and everything started to climb significantly. So I'm paying a lot higher interest rate than I ever thought I would be.
Well, one of the things that we get involved with is we get involved in quite a lot now, because we are on a declining interest rate sort of platform, which I think will continue. Are we going to get down to sort of 2%? Oh, no, we're not. But I think the fact that rates are drifting lower, it turns people's mind to thinking about the loans that they've got. And we are getting into a lot of discussion about refinancing of loans, whether it's an appropriate thing to do. And the discussion is always worthwhile. It's never wasted time. Sometimes we come up with the answer that actually you're better sticking where you are. Equally, there are other times where there is a solid case or because of the loan, type of loan that you've got, and the terms for actually saying, no, we can do better, we can refinance this. So that's something we are doing more and more now.
Yeah, and it's something for dentists, who are starting out, that's something that they need to bear in the back of their mind, 2 to 3 years in, as their business becomes established, is looking at that possible option of being able to refinance and seeing what else is out there, and what they might need, in line with their business goals. Is there a minimum amount of time where you suggest you need to have before you have that ability to be able to refinance effectively, as a startup practice?
Well, I mean, I think it's very much dependent on how successful the practice has been. For some, that discussion might well be appropriate, 18 months into practice. For others, different circumstances, it might be 4 or 5 years before they get to that point. But I mean, business is a dynamic thing, and if the business is going well, and there's another thing I often mention to people, that first business plan, those first cash flows, it's not a one-off exercise, casting aspect, and once you've got the loan, you cast it aside. Updating that cash flow, updating that business plan should be an annual event. Every year you should be sitting down with your bankers or your professional advisors in general, looking at that business plan and using it as a yardstick against how the business has done. Are you ahead of target? Are you behind target? If you're ahead of target, what other things might you do, like refinancing the loan to make things more beneficial? If you're behind target, what do you need to do to bring the business into the shape that you thought it was going to be when you wrote the initial business plan? So the business plan is a dynamic thing, and out of the review of that will often come the decision to look at refinancing or not.
Yeah, no, 100% agree with that. And also, it's important to note that if you're not in the position where you thought you should be, that also might require funding in order for you to get to that point.
Yeah, and sooner rather than later, because I find too many times I'm called in to rescue a situation that should never have got to be that bad, and the remedies, whilst they might still be there, are going to be a lot more painful than they would be otherwise. Very often the bank will still support you, but they require a higher price. They price in the new requirement for risk. Whereas if we'd have got to the problem beforehand, we could actually have almost, turned it into a positive thing, that the business needed to take these steps and needed these money for all the right reasons, not for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with that more. It's like you said, that all comes down to that planning, making sure you're 6 to 12 months ahead of, where you think you need to be, and being on top of that and monitoring it. It's very, very easy when you're running a practice, building a new practice, to actually forget about all of that, because you're just so busy in clinic actually trying to make the money and do the dentistry and everything else that goes around with it. But, it's one of the most important aspects that, I teach dentists as well, is you've got to make time to step out of the dental chair and actually, work on the business.
Yeah, and that's true of even me. I mean, I'm so busy running our business that every 6 months or so I'll sit down with our accountants and I'll say, right, now you're the professionals. I've been so busy. you're the professionals, you've been monitoring what I've been doing. Am I doing okay or am I not doing okay? And nobody's too big to know all the answers. You know, I think that's a common theme through life. There's always somebody that can give you good advice. There are also people that give you bad advice as well, but hopefully stick clear of those.
Yeah, no, fantastic. No, that's been excellent, Ray. Thank you so much for your time. If we just leave with one final comment. So for any dentist that's thinking about starting up and in the process, you know, what would be your number one piece of advice for them?
Do
it. Brilliant. I love it. Very confident, just do it there. Good.
Yeah, just do it. You made the biggest decision in your life, really, by deciding to become a dentist. Took yourself off to dental school for 5 years, and all that entailed. Taking the next step, doing it for yourself. Dentists always have. Dentists were never employees; they were always employers.
Yeah, fantastic. And Ray, if anybody wants to get in touch with you or wants to have a chat, where can they find you?
They can find me at arcox at medifinance.co.uk or on our website, www.medifinance.co.uk. And I speak to everybody. I'll speak to all of our clients at least once, even if subsequently they're passed on to another member of our team. And I still go and see dentists. I get in the car and do what the bank manager used to do, go and see you in your premises or in a hotel because you haven't got the premises yet, and have these discussions with you. Have the sort of discussion that you and I have been having this morning. I try and have that with every dentist that approaches us for help.
All right, fantastic. All right, thank you for your time, Ray. It's been really useful. Lots of nuggets of information in there. I'm sure everybody listening will find it very useful. So thank you very much.